All right, good afternoon. My name is Tanner Young. I'm a senior here in the undergraduate program of exercise science at Palm Beach Atlantic University. And it's truly a privilege to present this research to you. So my research topic was on the correlation between static and dynamic plantar pressures and the CARS scale in autism spectrum disorder. So really the simplified purpose of my research was to assess how various values involved in foot pressure correlates to the severity of autism. So what I'd like to do is really spend a good amount of time first on background of autism itself, the CARS score, the CARS scale, and what plantar pressures are and why they were used. Okay. So autism spectrum disorder, also known as ASD, this is a developmental disorder that varies in both severity and in type. It's commonly characterized by impairments in motor skills, in cognition, in communication, and social interactions. Although the causation is a little bit beyond the scope of my research topic, it is generally believed that the primary risk factors for developing autism is some combination of genetic mutation as well as environmental stresses and environmental factors. Autism today affects 1 in every 68 children born in the United States. And I'd like to focus on the word spectrum because spectrum really encompasses a wide variety of both types of disorders involved in autism as well as the severity of autism itself. Types ranging from Asperger's syndrome, disintegrative disorders, and other pervasive developmental disorders. And severity ranging from minimum, moderate, to severe. So when talking about severity, it's important to know the Child Autism Rating Scale, otherwise known as CARS. So this scale is a classification system that is used to identify the degree of severity in individuals diagnosed with autism. So generally, how this takes place is once a diagnosis is attained of autism, either an autism or diagnostic specialist will then have a 6-hour observation of the child, usually ranging between 3 to 22 or 21. It's a 6-hour observation in which the CARS scale, which is consists of 15 categories, is broken up into 0 to 3, kind of a scale of 0 to 3. They're looking for social cues, they're looking for motor skills, cognition, communication skills. And just kind of as a reference, for example, maybe category 1 of the 15 categories in the CARS scale would be the child avoids eye contact, and then 0 being the child very rarely avoids eye contact, or 3 being the child very frequently avoids eye contact. And then that total composite score is what determines the severity. Scores below 29 and below is considered minimum severity. Scores between 30 and 37 is considered moderate severity. And then scores anything above 38 is considered severe. So going into plantar pressure, what plantar pressure refers to is the pressure that is acted on the foot when it comes into contact with another surface. Typically, it's foot pressure in contact with the ground. The reason plantar pressures were assessed in this study is because children with ASD potentially face several developmental deficits, especially in motor skills. One of the common ones, according to Minshew et al., who will be in my references, is hypotonia, which is decreased muscle tone. So it's common to see impairments in balance, impairments in walking, in standing, in general posture, and things that really can influence everyday functionality of life. So the plantar pressures and the information derived from that really help to give an insight into, one, what those deficits are, how that's kind of influencing functional independence, as well as even potential risk for injury of falling. So the Ells Center of Excellence, this is where the research was conducted. This is an amazing facility that was established in 2009 by world-class golfer Ernie Els. And this is a charter school for individuals diagnosed with autism. And what they do is we're really just helping to improve functionality for the children as well as providing research opportunities to improve in the field of ASD. So, so the subjects, all of my subjects attended the L Center of Autism. We had 35 total subjects. Of the 35 subjects, there was no minimum severity. There was only severe to moderate severity. So that's what we'll be looking at today. So as you can see, broken up into the chart of height, weight, age, and body mass index, severe and moderate, there was really no noticeable big difference, no significant difference, which really provided a good platform continuing in this research. Okay, so each subject prior to testing followed a routine in which height, weight, and percent body fat was assessed. So each subject would come in one at a time to the room. They were instructed to have their shoes and socks removed, and they were given a tablet that actually went through an instructional video pretty much of what was going to be tested that day. Once the height, weight, and body fat percentage was assessed, we then went on to determining the plantar pressures. We did two different types, two different analysis of plantar pressure. One was static and one was dynamic. So what we used was called a PWalk 6000, which is essentially a pressure plate. And this pressure plate is a modular system, being wherever you have access to a computer, you can bring this, which was great for bringing it to the facility. So the PWalk 6000 is really detecting alterations in pressure, from pressure distribution to where the pressure is localized in the feet. So that is the equipment we use for plantar pressure. But as far as methods, when we assess Statk Analysis, we instructed the subject to have obviously no shoes or socks and to remain standing on the pressure plate for up to 5 seconds while remaining as still as possible. In regards to dynamic analysis took a little bit more time. We actually would instruct the patient to step back from the plate and try to walk in a straight line towards the plate, making contact with at least 1 foot on top of the pressure pad. This took several trials until we were able to get at least 3 recordings of each foot on the pad. All right, so before going into some of the key findings, I'd like to just discuss what Statk Analysis exactly is. So Statk Analysis is pretty much in the name. It's an assessment of a resting state or a standing state. So it's analyzing how pressure is shifting in the feet. It also is very important in determining what's called oscillation. So as you can see, this is actually an image taken from our software that was used. The software indicates the pressure and surface area of both feet and determines a point of origin. If you look in the top left where the blue feet are, the point of origin is that green dot. So that's what's considered the center of pressure. During the 5-second interval where they're standing, how that center of pressure oscillates, which is essentially another word for sway, how that center of pressure is moving or displacing, is all focused on the oscillation. So that's what Statk Analysis is, what we're really trying to look at. All of these values will go in depth, kind of one at a time, and they all, again, refer to oscillation. So these are the values correlated to the CAR score of both severe and moderate. It's clear to see that there is a difference between severe and moderate. Again, I will go into that more specifically into each value. And we're going to start with what's known as anteroposterior and mediolateral oscillation during Statk Analysis. This is body barycenter. So what this is essentially how that point of origin, how the body orbits that point of origin during the Statk Analysis. So you can see a noticeable difference between severe and moderate. This is in the millimeters squared. Severe individuals indicating 1,228 millimeters squared of oscillation, and moderate individuals indicating about 172 millimeters squared of oscillation. So noticeable difference. Oscillation, according to a study again by Minishu, which will be in the references, also indicates that oscillation is a great indicator of, one, of fall risk, because it's talking primarily about balance, and postural control. So it indicates fall risk. It also is an indicator of sensory motor capability. So following oscillation is center of pressure displacement. Again, this is another indicator of fall risk and potentially deficits in motor skills. So this is a determined value from how far that displacement is occurring from the point of origin. And this is a scalar quantity, so it has no particular direction in mind. But you can see in millimeters that severe is indicating about 107 millimeters of displacement, and moderate CAR score is indicating about half of that, being 48.87 millimeters of displacement. The average speed of oscillation. So this is just quite literally the speed in which the displacement is occurring in millimeters per second. So again, severe 21.57 millimeters per second of displacement in the speed, and then moderate 9.77 millimeters per second of displacement. So distance of oscillation by the area of surface. So this data figure presents as having more of an inverse relationship. Being the lower the value is, the actual greater the potential, in theory, deficit may be, or oscillation is. Severe indicating 0.34 and moderate indicating 0.75. In relation to another research study that was actually done by Dr. Matthew Mitchell here, he looked at planar pressures in both typical individuals, being individuals who are not diagnosed with autism, and atypical individuals, and found that the average score for this was around 2.5. So obviously a noticeable difference. Okay, so dynamic analysis. I would like to discuss this further before going into the kind of key findings. So dynamic analysis consists of the assessment of foot pressure distribution, pressure and surface area distribution during a normalized walking pattern. So how the pressure is distributed and how the surface area is distributed in the foot when they're walking. The software is great because it determines how pressure and surface is distributed in a percent of a total percent, being 100 in both feet. And it actually breaks down the foot into separate regions, being the phalanges, the metatarsals, the midfoot, and the calcaneus. So first, I wanted to look at the distribution of the planar of the surface area. So this indicates what percentage of distribution the foot surface has. So when we look at the foot as a whole, being the surface area of 100%, this is indicating, the plots indicate how much of that surface is in the phalanges, in the metatarsals, in the midfoot, and in the rear foot. So as a point, of the 100% of surface area, we can notice for severe moderate, around 15 to 16% of the surface area is in the phalanges. And it is difficult to notice a difference in the dynamic stage as far as distribution of surface area between severe and moderate. So the next is essentially the same concept. It's the distribution of planar pressure. So the distribution of planar pressure is another crucial value that we assessed. And it's demonstrating what areas of the foot, what regions of the foot hold what percent of the pressure out of the total 100%. Again, metatarsals, we can see, is important to note that the majority of the pressure is held in the metatarsals, at 50 to a little over 50% of that total 100% of pressure. So really the purpose of this study was to assess how those values of static and dynamic planar pressure, how they correlate to the severity. Each of these values show static impairment in ASD, and they do demonstrate that this impairment increases as the CAR score increase. Further research, I would say, is required to determine the specific individual causation of those impairments. But generally, the approach going into this research, especially following other research studies I had assessed in Dr. Matthew Mitchell, was really that there's a large difference between the planar pressures of atypical and typical individuals. And so the theory going into it was that individuals with a more severe case or a severe diagnosis of autism would be further from the norm, while individuals with a less severe diagnosis of autism would be closer to the norm. So this was certainly true as far as the static analysis. However, there was no significant difference between severe and moderate individuals in the dynamic analysis. It is important to note, however, that the majority of the surface area distribution as well as plantar pressure distribution was held in the metatarsals for individuals with autism spectrum disorder. Typically labeling what we would know as, I guess, as toe walkers, higher than the typical value. So future studies are certainly crucial in determining how pressures can significantly correlate to these, this CAR score, the severity of autism. But I truly appreciate everyone who's listened today, and at this point I will take any questions.
Yeah, just one very good presentation. One suggestion would be, you know, to have some kind of error bars on these graphs, because just looking at differences,
Yes, sir.
you really have no idea, you know, if they're significant, but error bars would tell you right away.
Yes, sir.
So it sounds like people with severe autism have a hard time standing still.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, might it be possible, how would people who don't have autism have any idea? Could you actually predict somebody's likely to be, you know, in your opinion, autistic by the fact that, you know, by looking at their static foot pressure?
Absolutely. And that was kind of the role of this, was could plantar pressures be even correlated or an indicator of the severity of autism?
Right.
You know, there's no medical test to determine autism. It's visual. So I would say it would definitely, we see it in even when the research that I conducted was repetitive movements. It was even difficult for them to stand still for the 5 seconds allotted. So I would definitely say that, yes, absolutely.
Very interesting.
I thought your presentation was excellent, but I have some questions.
Yeah, of course.
In science, when we use the word significant, that means that you have a p-value. Did you do that?
So I used the R value for correlation, and static was significant, yeah.
Okay, because next time it might be a little helpful, instead of looking at the lines on the graph, the same thing he said,
Absolutely.
was to do something to show scientifically what happened. Also, you mentioned something about the people with severe autism were further from the norm, but what's the norm?
Further from, what are you referring to exactly?
I don't know. You said that people with severe autism are further from the norm, and people with moderate are closer to the norm, but we don't know what the norm is.
So this is referring to other research studies that have been conducted. And so what I'm referring to as norm is normal values we see in plantar pressures. For example, oscillation or distance over surface. One of the, I can kind of go back to it. As far as oscillation, so norm would be normal values. Typically we see anything between 50 to 300 in oscillation of millimeters squared. So what I was kind of indicating was that individuals with more severe autism would be further away from that normative value. But I'm sorry, I didn't specify the value itself.
That's okay. I thought you had a chart. Maybe I missed something.
Yeah, no, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
I was wondering, how many of the 35 people that you studied fell into the severe group, and how many are in the moderate group?
Absolutely. So we actually assessed a total of over 80, but 35, we only got the CAR score for 35 individuals. How that was broken up, I believe it was 13 moderate and 17 severe.
And is there any, has anyone done any type of clinical studies or anything to show that, like, as you get further and further away from the norm values, does that correlate with falls, or does that correlate with injury or anything like that?
So there has been, I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Minshew right here looked at underdevelopment of the postural control system in autism. He related that larger amounts of oscillation indicated a higher fall rate because they actually had a system tracking the fall rates of the individuals. And then they looked at oscillation and they found a correlation between the two.
What was the age of these people?
I'm sorry, yes, the age was between 14 and 22 years old.
And how were they chosen for the study?
So they were chosen by parent consent. We had to get consent from the parents. And it was really just, they have an upper division and a lower division from the facility, the L Center of Excellence. And they were chosen by the faculty too. Yeah. Yep.
We're actually going to have to cut this short
Okay.
for the questioning. I'm sure he'll be available to talk afterwards if you have any more questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.